She'd scrubbed blood from his marble floors without flinching, but asking the city's most dangerous man to play her husband for a day, that required a courage she wasn't sure she possessed until her ex's taunting text arrived, and desperation became her boldest weapon. Juliana Brooks had perfected the art of invisibility over 11 months of cleaning Gabriel Corsetti's penthouse. She knew how to move through rooms like smoke, how to erase evidence of her presence, until the only proof she'd been there was the lemony scent of polish and the mirror shine on surfaces that cost more than her annual salary. She'd learned which floorboards creaked, which hours Mr. Corsetti preferred absolute silence, and, most importantly, which rooms to avoid when the men in expensive suits arrived carrying briefcases that clinked with something heavier than paperwork. Invisibility kept you alive in a world where noticing too much could get you disappeared. But standing in the arched doorway of Gabriel Corsetti's private office on a humid Tuesday afternoon in June, with her phone burning a hole in her apron pocket and her grandmother's voice still ringing in her ears from their morning call, Juliana was about to shatter her own cardinal rule. She was about to be seen. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all, missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now, back to the story. The office was a study in controlled power, all dark woods and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Manhattan like a conquered territory. Gabriel sat behind a desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. His attention focused on documents spread before him like battle plans, which, knowing what she knew about his import business, they very well might be. He wore a burgundy suit jacket that should have looked ostentatious, but instead made him look like old money with a dangerous edge. His dark hair was styled with the kind of casual precision that took effort to appear effortless, and his jaw, sharp enough to cut glass, was shadowed with the faintest hint of stubble. At 34, Gabriel Corsetti had been called many things by the New York press: entrepreneur, philanthropist, eligible bachelor, and, in whispers that never made it to print, the youngest Don to control the city's underground in 50 years. Juliana had cleaned enough blood from his bathroom sink to know which rumors were true. "You've been standing there for 90 seconds, Miss Brooks," Gabriel said without looking up, his voice carrying the smooth, cultivated tone of someone who'd grown up with private tutors and etiquette lessons before learning how to break bones. "Either you've discovered a fascinating architectural feature, or you need something." Her throat went desert dry. In 11 months, she'd exchanged perhaps 30 dozen words with him, mostly variations of "Good morning, Mr. Corsetti," and "I'll return later, Mr. Corsetti." He paid her $72,000 a year through a management company to maintain his penthouse, a salary so generous it had made her suspicious until she realized it was probably hush money. She'd never been late, never snooped, never asked questions about the occasional crimson stain or the men who visited at night, Mummy. She'd been the perfect invisible employee. Until now. "I need to ask you something," she managed, her voice steadier than the earthquake happening in her chest. "Something unusual." Gabriel's pen stilled. He looked up, and Juliana felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. His eyes were the color of expensive cognac, sharp with an intelligence that had built empires and buried enemies. This was a man who could read a balance sheet and a threat with equal precision. "I'm listening," he said, leaning back in his leather chair with the languid grace of a predator confident in its dominance. The words she'd rehearsed for the past hour evaporated. What came out instead was a flood of truth, messy and desperate and completely unprofessional. My grandmother is turning 80 this Saturday. She's having a family reunion in Savannah, that's in Georgia, and she specifically called me this morning because I've been avoiding these things for 5 years, but she says she's not getting any younger and she wants to see me before she dies, which is emotional manipulation but also effective because I love her more than anyone in the world. Juliana sucked in a breath. The problem is my ex-boyfriend Terrence will be there because he's now engaged to my cousin Shanice. Yes, my actual cousin, which is a whole level of betrayal I'm still processing. And he's been texting me for 3 months about how I'm still single and how he upgraded and how I should try not to embarrass myself at the reunion. She pulled her phone from her apron, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled up the most recent message. Walking over to the desk took every ounce of courage she possessed, but she placed the phone where Gabriel could see it. The text read, "Heard you're actually coming Saturday. Brave. Try not to look too pathetic when you see what a real woman looks like. Shanice can't wait to show you her ring. Smiley." Gabriel's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. The same look she'd glimpsed once when a business associate had tried to shortchange him on a deal. "Charming," Gabriel said, his tone suggesting Terrence was anything but. "And you're showing me this because I need you to pretend to be my husband for one day." The words came out in a rush, like ripping off a bandage. "I know it sounds insane. I know I'm just your housekeeper and you're you. But I'll pay you back somehow. I'll work extra hours. Miss Brooks." Gabriel held up one hand, silencing her spiral. She obeyed, mainly because her lungs were screaming for oxygen. Gabriel picked up her phone, scrolling through the messages with the clinical interest of someone examining evidence. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he read, and when he set the phone down, his fingers drummed once against the desk. A tell she'd noticed meant he was thinking. "Your ex-boyfriend is dating your cousin, flaunting his engagement, and actively attempting to humiliate you at your grandmother's 80th birthday celebration," Gabriel summarized. "And you want me to attend this reunion, posing as your husband? To what exactly? Make him jealous? Prove you've moved on?"
"Both," Juliana admitted. "Mostly, I just want to wipe that smug look off his face. I want him to see that I'm not pathetic, that someone wanted me, that I'm—" She stopped, horrified to feel tears pricking her eyes. "God, this is so stupid. Forget I said anything."
She turned to leave, mortification burning through her veins like acid. $25,000. Juliana froze, turned. "I'm sorry?" Gabriel stood, moving around the desk with the controlled grace of a man comfortable in his own power. He was tall, over 6 feet, and up close, Juliana could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, a souvenir from whatever violent history had shaped him. "I'll attend your family reunion as your husband," he said, his tone suggesting he was negotiating a business deal rather than discussing a fake marriage. "In exchange, you'll attend an event for me. Call it an even trade." Juliana's brain stuttered. "You want me to attend something with you? Why?" "My mother," Gabriel said, and somehow he made those 2 words sound like a curse, "has decided I need to be married. She's been orchestrating increasingly aggressive matchmaking attempts, the most recent involving an ambush dinner with 6 women she deemed appropriate." His lip curled slightly. "Next month, she's planning what she calls a family gathering, where she's invited every eligible daughter of every family with connections she wants to strengthen. It will be intolerable."
"So you want me to bring me to horrify her?" Juliana wasn't sure if she should be offended or impressed.
"I prefer the term establish boundaries." Gabriel's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "If I arrive with a wife, unexpected, completely unsuitable by her standards, and presented as a fait accompli, she'll have to accept that I make my own choices. After the dinner, we can have a quiet, amicable divorce. You walk away with $25,000 for approximately 8 hours of your time across 2 events. $25,000! The number hit Juliana like a physical blow. That was nearly half what she made in a year of scrubbing floors and pretending not to notice criminal activity. That was a security deposit on a real apartment. That was breathing room. That was freedom from the constant anxiety of living paycheck to paycheck in a city that devoured people like her. Why me? She asked, because she'd learned long ago that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. You could hire an actress, someone trained to play a part. Actresses lie for a living, Gabriel said simply. You, Miss Brooks, have spent 11 months in my home knowing exactly what I am, and never once trying to leverage that information. You're discreet, intelligent, and, forgive my bluntness, you have nothing to gain by betraying me, which makes you infinitely more trustworthy than anyone I could hire. He tilted his head slightly. Also, you're the first person who's ever asked me for help with something so refreshingly petty. I respect that. Most people who ask me for favors want money laundered or rivals eliminated. Do you... Juliana started, then caught herself. Don't ask questions. That was rule number 1. Do I what, Miss Brooks?
Nothing. Never mind.
Do I actually eliminate rivals? Gabriel finished for her, his smile turning genuinely amused. Sometimes, when necessary, but I find it's much more effective to make them irrelevant. Death creates martyrs and power vacuums. Irrelevance creates silence. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Juliana stared at his hand, manicured, elegant, and undoubtedly responsible for authorizing acts she couldn't let herself think about. Every rational cell in her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. You didn't make deals with men like Gabriel Corsetti. You didn't invite them into your life, even temporarily. You definitely didn't pretend to be married to them. But rationality hadn't kept her warm at night for 5 years. Rationality hadn't protected her from Terrence's betrayal or her cousin's smug superiority. Rationality wouldn't silence the voice in her head that whispered she was exactly as pathetic as Terrence claimed. $25,000 would, though. And so would watching Terrence's face when she walked into that reunion on Gabriel Corsetti's arm. Deal, she said, taking his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and sent an entirely inappropriate shiver up her spine. This was her employer, her dangerous, criminally connected, absurdly handsome employer, who was now going to pretend to be her husband for reasons that sounded logical but felt increasingly insane. We leave Friday evening, Gabriel said, releasing her hand and returning to his desk as if they'd just discussed her weekly schedule rather than a fake marriage. I assume you'll need time to prepare your family for the fact that you've apparently married someone without telling anyone.
Oh, God. My grandmother is going to lose her mind.
Grandmothers usually do, Gabriel said with the tone of someone who spoke from experience. Text me the details of the reunion, location, time, dress code. And Miss Brooks, you should probably start calling me Gabriel. Mr. Corsetti seems rather formal for a husband. Right, Gabriel. Got it. Juliana backed toward the door, her heart performing acrobatics. I'll go now, clean something, do my job. Miss Brooks. She paused in the doorway. Gabriel looked up from his documents, his expression inscrutable. Whatever this Terrence did to make you doubt your worth, he was wrong. You're far from pathetic. The words hit her square in the chest, unexpected and devastating in their simple sincerity. Before she could respond, before she could do something monumentally stupid like cry or thank him or ask him to repeat that, Juliana fled. She made it to the kitchen before her hands started shaking. Leaning against the marble counter, she pulled out her phone and stared at Terrence's message. Then she opened her text chain with her grandmother. Me. Big news. I'm bringing someone to the reunion. My husband. The response came in 14 seconds. Grandma D. You're what? Me. Long story. You'll love him. See you Saturday. She silenced her phone before the inevitable flood of questions could arrive. She'd deal with that later. Right now, she needed to focus on the fact that she'd just agreed to fake marry a mob boss to spite her ex-boyfriend and terrorize his socialite mother. This was either going to be the greatest decision of her life, or the one that finally killed her. Possibly both. What Juliana couldn't know, was that Terrence Jenkins hadn't just been texting her from Georgia. He'd been texting from a halfway house in Savannah, having been released 3 months early from a 2-year sentence for wire fraud. What she also didn't know was that during his incarceration, Terrence had made some interesting friends. The kind of friends who worked for the Valentino family. The same Valentino family that had been trying to muscle into Gabriel Corsetti's territory for the past 18 months. And what neither Juliana nor Gabriel knew was that a simple fake marriage, born from petty revenge and maternal manipulation, was about to become the most dangerous game either of them had ever played. But that was Friday's problem. Today, Juliana had to figure out what a mob boss's fake wife was supposed to wear to a family reunion in Georgia.
Friday evening arrived with the speed of an execution and the inevitability of gravity. Juliana stood in her tiny Queens apartment, staring at the contents of her closet spread across her bed like evidence of a life half-lived. Sundresses that had seen better days. Work uniforms that smelled perpetually of lemon polish. A single cocktail dress she'd bought on sale 3 years ago for a wedding she'd ultimately skipped because Terrence had convinced her they couldn't afford the gift. Nothing screamed, "I married a wealthy, powerful man, and I'm absolutely thriving." Her phone buzzed. A text from Gabriel. "Car arrives at 6 p.m. Pack for 2 nights. Business casual for the reunion, but bring something formal for my mother's dinner next week. If you don't have appropriate attire, there's a boutique on Madison that stays open late. Tell them you're my wife. They'll know what to do." Juliana read the message 3 times, her stomach performing complicated gymnastics. His wife. Even as pretend, the word felt foreign and dangerous on her tongue. A second text arrived. "Charge everything to my account. Consider it part of the arrangement." She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt like a kept woman, which was ridiculous because this was a business transaction, a mutually beneficial arrangement, nothing more. Still, the idea of walking into some Madison Avenue boutique and claiming to be Gabriel Corsetti's wife felt like playing with fire while doused in gasoline. Her phone rang. Grandma D's photo filled the screen. A beautiful woman with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that missed nothing. Juliana had been avoiding her calls for 3 days. That cowardice officially ended now. "Hey, Grandma." Juliana Marie Brooks. Her grandmother's voice carried the weight of 80 years of not tolerating nonsense. "You want to explain to me how you got married without inviting your own grandmother to the wedding?" It was spontaneous, Juliana said, which was technically true if you considered Tuesday afternoon spontaneous. Very small, just us and what did people do for quickie weddings? Justice of the peace. Uh-huh. The skepticism could have stripped paint. "And this husband of yours, what's his name?" Gabriel Corsetti." Silence. Long enough that Juliana checked to see if the call had dropped. "Corsetti," Grandma D repeated slowly. "That name sounds familiar. Why does that name sound familiar?" "Because he's probably made the news for various business dealings that couldn't be proven in court," Juliana didn't say. "He's in import-export. Very successful. You'll like him." Import-export? Now her grandmother sounded amused, which was somehow worse than angry. "Baby girl, I might be old, but I'm not senile. I know what import-export means when a man has that kind of money in New York. Your grandfather used to work for men in import-export back in the day." Juliana's brain screeched to a halt. "What?" "Oh, don't sound so shocked. How do you think we afforded that house in Savannah? Your grandfather drove for some very interesting people before he got smart and opened the restaurant." Grandma D's voice softened. "So this Gabriel Corsetti, he treats you right? He's good to you?" The question landed with unexpected weight. Juliana thought about Gabriel offering her $25,000 for 2 days of pretending, about him calling her intelligent and discreet, about the way he'd read Terrence's texts, and something cold had flickered in his eyes, like he was already planning retribution, even though she'd never asked for it. "He's good to me," Juliana said, and was surprised to realize it wasn't entirely a lie. "Then I guess I'll meet him Saturday," Grandma D said. "But Juliana, whatever you're really doing, be careful. Men like that, they live in a different world, and that world has teeth." The call ended, leaving Juliana staring at her reflection in the mirror mounted on her closet door. She saw a 28-year-old woman with brown skin that never quite fit the beauty standards of either her white colleagues or her more polished black peers. Natural hair she'd finally learned to love after years of relaxers and weaves. A body that was curvy in some places and stubborn in others. Features that were pretty enough, but not striking. "Forgettable," Terrence had once said during an argument. "You're just forgettable." "Not after tomorrow," she told her reflection. "After tomorrow, he's going to remember." At 5:47 p.m., Juliana stood on the sidewalk outside her building with a hastily packed duffel bag and a heart rate that qualified as cardio. She'd skipped the Madison Avenue boutique, instead digging out her best sundress, a yellow number that at least fit well, and the black cocktail dress for Gabriel's mother's dinner. If she looked like someone who couldn't afford better, well, that was probably the point anyway. She was supposed to be unsuitable. The black town car that pulled up at exactly 6 p.m. was so polished she could see her reflection in the hood. The driver emerged, a thick-shouldered man in a dark suit who had "security" written all over him, and opened the back door without a word. Gabriel sat in the back seat, looking unfairly composed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He was typing on his phone, but looked up as she slid in, his gaze cataloging her appearance in one sweep. "Miss Brooks," he said, slipping his phone into his pocket. "You look nervous." "I'm about to pretend to be married to my employer for the weekend. Nervous seems appropriate." His mouth quirked. "Fair point. First rule of a successful deception, sell the backstory. We need to get our story straight before we land." "We're flying?" Juliana squeaked. "Did you think we were driving to Savannah?" Gabriel's amusement was barely concealed. "I have a plane waiting at Teterboro. We'll be in Savannah in under 2 hours. Of course he had a plane. Why wouldn't a man who probably had his own body disposal team have a private jet? The drive to the airport passed in a blur of Gabriel asking questions and Juliana realizing she was absolutely unprepared for this level of deception. Where did they meet? How long had they been dating before marriage? Why the quick wedding? "We met when you hired me to clean your apartment," Juliana suggested. "That's at least true." "No." Gabriel's response was immediate and firm. "That makes you look like the help I promoted to wife. It suggests a power imbalance that invites speculation." "But there is a power imbalance," Juliana pointed out. "You're literally paying me to do this." "Yes, but they don't know that." Gabriel leaned back against the leather seat, his expression thoughtful. "We met at a charity gala 6 months ago. You were there with a friend, a nurse at Mount Sinai, we'll say, someone who received tickets through her hospital. You caught my attention because you were the only person in the room not trying to impress me. We talked about art. You studied art history in college, didn't you?" "How did you know that?" Juliana asked, startled. "I read your resume before hiring you. You graduated from Georgia State with a degree in art history and a minor in museum studies. You moved to New York to work in galleries, but the pay was abysmal, so you switched to domestic work." He said it without judgment, just facts. "That's actually a perfect cover. You're educated, cultured, but chose a practical career path. It explains why you clean houses, but also why you'd fit into my world." Juliana stared at him. "You've thought about this a lot." I think about everything a lot, Miss Brooks. It's how I've stayed alive. He pulled out his phone again, typing rapidly. I'm having appropriate wardrobe delivered to the hotel in Savannah. You're my wife now, which means you need to look the part. Consider it costuming for the role. Gabriel? If you say you can't accept expensive gifts, I'll remind you this isn't a gift, it's a prop. His eyes met hers, cognac-colored and unnervingly direct. You're doing me a favor by attending my mother's dinner. This weekend is me doing you a favor. The clothes are simply necessary equipment. Put that way, it was harder to argue. Still, as the car pulled into the private airfield and Juliana saw the gleaming jet waiting on the tarmac, she felt reality bending around her like heat shimmer. This wasn't her life. Women like her didn't fly on private jets with dangerous men to execute elaborate revenge plots against ex-boyfriends. Except, apparently, for this weekend, they did. The plane's interior was obscenely luxurious. Cream leather seats, polished wood accents, and a flight attendant who appeared with champagne before they'd even taken off. Juliana accepted a glass because refusing seemed rude, then immediately regretted it when Gabriel raised his own glass. To successful deceptions, he said. And surviving them, Juliana added. They clinked glasses. The champagne was better than any wine she'd ever tasted, which seemed unfair. Did everything in Gabriel's world have to be superior? Once they were airborne, Gabriel surprised her by pulling out an iPad and turning it toward her. On the screen was a photo of an elegant woman in her early 60s, with silver hair styled in a perfect bob and the kind of bone structure that suggested generations of good breeding. My mother, Vivian Corsetti, Gabriel said. Born Vivian St. Clair, daughter of a federal judge and a socialite. She married my father when she was 22, believing she was marrying into old money respectability. By the time she realized the family business was significantly less legal than advertised, I'd already been born. He swiped to another photo, a younger Vivian with a dark-haired man who had Gabriel's eyes. My father, Lorenzo Corsetti, died when I was 16. Heart attack, officially. Rival families poisoning, unofficially. I'm sorry, Juliana said automatically. Don't be. He was a brutal man who treated my mother like a particularly valuable possession. Gabriel's voice was matter-of-fact, but something cold flickered in his expression. After he died, I took over the business. My mother has spent the past 18 years trying to pretend I'm a legitimate businessman and not what I actually am. What are you? Juliana asked before she could stop herself. Gabriel looked at her for a long moment. Pragmatic, efficient, and significantly less violent than my father, though I suspect that's not saying much. He swiped to another photo, a sprawling estate with manicured gardens. This is where dinner will be next Friday, my mother's house in Connecticut. She'll have approximately 30 guests, all carefully selected to either strengthen business alliances or parade eligible daughters in my direction. She's really that determined to marry you off? She believes a wife and children will make me settle down and go legitimate. Gabriel's smile was sharp. What she doesn't understand is that I have no interest in being legitimate. I'm very good at what I do, and I prefer it to whatever sanitized version of power she imagines I should want. Juliana took another sip of champagne, processing this. So, when you introduce me...
You're Juliana Corsetti, my wife of 3 months. We married quietly because I valued privacy and you weren't interested in a society spectacle. You studied art history, currently work as a private estate manager, which is true enough, and we met through mutual friends. He paused. She'll be horrified that I married without her approval. She'll be more horrified that you're black, which will tell me exactly what I need to know about whether our relationship can ever be honest. The casual way he said it, the acknowledgement of his mother's likely racism, made Juliana's chest tight. You realize I'm going to be the target of her displeasure? You'll be protected, Gabriel said with absolute certainty. Anyone who disrespects my wife, fake or otherwise, disrespects me, and people who disrespect me tend to regret it.
He said it like he was discussing the weather, not implied threats. "Besides, I suspect you're tougher than you think, Miss Brooks." "Juliana," she said, "if we're married, you should probably use my first name." "Juliana," he repeated, and something about the way he said it, careful, deliberate, made her skin tingle. "That's better." They spent the rest of the flight reviewing details. Gabriel had an almost frightening attention to minutiae. He wanted to know her grandmother's name, her cousin's name, even Terrence's last name. When she mentioned Terrence's surname was Jenkins, something flickered across Gabriel's face. "Jenkins?" he repeated. "Terrence Jenkins from Savannah? You know him?" Juliana's stomach dropped. "No, but I know someone who mentioned that name recently." Gabriel was already typing on his phone, his expression darkening. "One of my associates flagged a Terrence Jenkins in a report about the Valentino family's new connections in the South." "The Valentino family?" "My competition," Gabriel said absently, still focused on his phone. "They've been trying to expand into my territories. If your ex-boyfriend is connected to them—" He looked up, his eyes sharp. "When did he and your cousin start dating?" "About 4 months ago, I think. He got out of—" Juliana stopped. "He was in prison, wire fraud. He got out early on good behavior." Gabriel's expression went very still. "How early? 3 months? I don't know exactly. Why does it matter?" "Because prison is where people make very interesting friends." Gabriel's voice had gone cold, the charming businessman replaced by something significantly more dangerous. "And because the Valentinos have been recruiting in Savannah. If Terrence is working for them and he knows you work for me—" "He doesn't know I work for you," Juliana said quickly. "I never told him who I worked for. I just said I did estate management for wealthy clients." "But your cousin knows you're bringing me to the reunion," Gabriel pointed out. "If she told Terrence, and Terrence told the Valentinos—" He leaned back, his jaw tight. "This might be more complicated than either of us anticipated." "Are you saying this is dangerous?" Juliana's voice climbed an octave. "Because I signed up for awkward family drama, not actual mob violence." "I'm saying we should be cautious." Gabriel's hand moved to cover hers where it gripped the armrest. The gesture was probably meant to be reassuring, but his palm was warm and his fingers were steady, and Juliana's brain short-circuited slightly. "I'll have security nearby, discreet but present, and if anything feels off, we leave immediately." "Maybe we should just cancel," Juliana said, even though the thought of not showing up, of proving Terrence right about her cowardice, made her want to scream. "Absolutely not." Gabriel's voice was firm. "You want to face your ex-boyfriend with proof you've moved on? We're giving you that. But we're doing it intelligently." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, sending an entirely inappropriate shiver through her. "I protect what's mine, Juliana, even temporarily." The plane began its descent, and Juliana looked out the window at the lights of Savannah spreading below them like scattered diamonds. Her grandmother was down there somewhere, probably preparing enough food to feed an army. Her cousin was down there, probably trying on outfits to maximize Juliana's humiliation. And Terrence was down there, potentially connected to people who wanted Gabriel dead. "This is insane," she whispered. "Most worthwhile things are," Gabriel said. The plane touched down smoothly, and as they taxied to the private terminal, Juliana caught sight of another town car waiting on the tarmac. Gabriel's security, she assumed. The man really didn't do anything halfway. Inside the terminal, a woman in an elegant suit approached them with a garment bag and 2 large shopping bags. "Mr. Corsetti," she said with a professional smile, "your wardrobe, as requested. Everything should fit based on the measurements provided." He had her measurements? Juliana tried not to think of how he had acquired those. "Thank you, Elena." Gabriel took the bags, handing them to Juliana like it was perfectly normal to have custom clothing delivered to an airport. "The hotel?" "The mansion on Forsyth Park, presidential suite. Your luggage is already there." Of course it was, because Gabriel Corsetti didn't do things like check in or wait for bags. The drive to the hotel passed in a daze. Juliana clutched the garment bag like a lifeline, very aware of Gabriel beside her, his presence somehow larger in the enclosed space. He was on his phone again, his expression carved from granite as he typed rapid-fire messages. "Problem?" she asked. "Preventative measures," he said without looking up. "I'm having background checks run on everyone attending your reunion. If there are any Valentino connections beyond Terrence, I want to know before tomorrow." That seems excessive. That seems survival. Gabriel finally looked at her, and his expression softened slightly. "I realize this has become more than you bargained for. If you want to back out, I'll still pay you the $25,000. Consider it compensation for my paranoia."
Juliana thought about it. Really thought about it. She could take the money, go home, text Grandma D with some excuse about Gabriel having a business emergency. She could stay invisible, stay safe, stay forgettable. Or she could walk into that reunion tomorrow wearing whatever obscenely expensive outfit was in this garment bag on the arm of a man who commanded rooms and controlled territories and show Terrence exactly how far from pathetic she'd become. "I'm not backing out," she said. Gabriel smiled. Not his business smile, but something genuine and slightly dangerous. "Good. I'd have been disappointed if you had." The mansion on Forsyth Park was exactly as opulent as its name suggested. The presidential suite was larger than Juliana's entire apartment, with a living room that overlooked the historic district and a bedroom that— "There's one bedroom," Juliana said, staring at the king-sized bed with its expensive linens. "Two, actually," Gabriel said, pointing to a door she'd missed. "That connects to a second suite. Separate spaces, but accessible if we need to maintain the illusion for hotel staff." He set down his bag. "I'm not expecting anything, Juliana. This is a business arrangement. Your bedroom has a lock, and I've never been the kind of man who takes what isn't offered." The careful way he said it, the acknowledgement that some men were, made Juliana's throat tight. "Thank you. Don't thank me for basic decency." He checked his watch. "It's nearly 10. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a performance, and you'll need to be sharp." Juliana retreated to her room with the garment bag, closing the door and engaging the lock more out of habit than fear. Inside the bag was a sundress in deep coral that probably cost more than her monthly rent, with matching sandals and accessories that screamed money without being ostentatious. Whoever Elena was, she knew what she was doing. Juliana hung the dress carefully, then sat on the edge of the bed that was somehow more comfortable than any mattress she'd ever touched. Her phone buzzed, a text from Grandma D. "Can't wait to meet this mysterious husband tomorrow. Your cousin says Terrence can't wait either. He seems very interested in Gabriel. Too interested." Juliana's blood went cold. She forwarded the message to Gabriel. His response came in seconds. "Noted. I'll adjust accordingly. Sleep well, wife." Wife. Even as a joke, the word made her heart do complicated things. Juliana changed into her pajamas, washed her face, and lay down in the most comfortable bed she'd ever experienced. Through the door, she could hear Gabriel moving around in the living room, probably still on his phone, probably still plotting contingencies. She'd come to Savannah to humiliate her ex-boyfriend. Instead, she might have just walked into a war. But as sleep finally claimed her, Juliana realized something surprising. She trusted Gabriel to keep her safe. She shouldn't. She barely knew him beyond their employer-employee relationship. But something about the way he'd looked at her, the careful way he'd explained the dangers, the absolute certainty in his voice when he said he'd protect her, it felt real, even though none of this was. That should have terrified her. Instead, it just made her more determined to see this through. Terrence Jenkins thought she was pathetic? Tomorrow, he was going to learn exactly how wrong he'd been. Thank you for watching this story to the end.
If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next part, because the story continues, and it's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So, do check it out.